Did Paul contemplate suicide? We don't often think this question, but it has been raised before in response to a passage in Philippians in which Paul discusses his desire to be with the Lord. For example, he specifically says in chapter 1 that he's in the section in which he says, "For to live is Christ and to die is gain." He then goes on to say, I am torn between the two. I long to depart and be with Christ, which is far better. And so some scholars have suggested that this means that Paul was contemplating suicide. Now, I don't think that we should dismiss this out of hand. There is a bit of potential truth to this, in part because how could Paul be discussing longing to depart if he isn't thinking about suicide? What else would he be thinking about if not like dying? So it does seem to be an argument that we can't just dismiss out of hand. The bigger points to consider on why Paul is most likely not thinking about suicide is because, number one, the whole letter of Philippians is very joyful. He's not necessarily thinking about it in terms of some like, I'm really sad, I'm depressed, and so I need to kill myself. Philippians actually seems to express the opposite. It's a joyful letter. I'm talking about how he's rejoicing. He's rejoicing. Even when he talks about those who preach against him, he says, in this I rejoice, yes, and I will continue to rejoice. So Paul seems to be expressing deep happiness, not the sort of moroseness that would indicate some sort of depression leading to suicide. I think the reason why Paul writes this is because he does have a little bit of control over whether he lives or dies, not in this form of suicide, but in the form of whether or not he'll contest the accusations that are being leveraged against him. So right now that he's in jail, most likely in Rome, but potentially in Ephesus, as he's writing the letter to the Philippians, and he theoretically could just say, you know what, I throw in the towel. I will allow myself to be condemned, and I'm not even going to contest it. That, I think, is what Paul is considering. And when he's considering this, he's not obsessed with death. He's obsessed with the Lord. That's why he says, I long to depart and be with Christ. It's not that he has some fixation with death, it's that he has a fixation with Christ. And would we all have some sort of fixation with Christ that even death shouldn't scare us because it brings us into the presence of our glorious Lord and Savior Jesus Christ?